Hi, and welcome to the SDSU Studio Series. In the midst of what is happening in the world today, we've created a series of digital conversations with Broadway professionals where we talk about the craft and the business of Broadway and how we can pass along this legacy to the next generation of musical theater artists. The SDSU Studio Series is organized by the SDSU MFA Musical Theatre Program. This program is one of only a handful of graduate degrees offered in the United States that offer the terminal degree in musical theater. And our graduates are acting, directing, choreographing, music directing, writing, and teaching in university positions worldwide. Our goal is to bring the professional world and the academic world together so that students of musical theater are prepared for today's job market. My name is Robert Meff. I worked as a professional conductor, music director, orchestrator on Broadway for 22 years before moving to San Diego to become head of the MFA Musical Theatre Program. My goal is that every person who wants to be a musical theater artist is able to access what is going on in the professional world, which led me to creating the series, and which leads me to my guest, Matt Doebler. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Before we begin, I want to give some expectations of today's discussion. If you have questions, feel free to use the question and answer function built into Zoom. After my questions are completed, I will ask questions from your submissions. Hey, and if you're from a university musical theater program, type the name of your school in the chat function. I would love to see who's represented. Let's begin. Matt Doebler is a New York-based Broadway music director with credits that range from Wicked and the Book of Mormon to Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 and his current show, Jagged Little Pill. Welcome, Matt. I'm so glad that you're here and thank you for your time.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Now, the university musical theater community is adapting to the coronavirus by migrating classes online and providing content like this interview to students and educators nationwide. How is Broadway coping, and how are you coping?
I think Broadway is still, we're all kind of in shock because when we were told that this shutdown would happen, I literally said to people at the Broaders, we're getting our stuff, see you in a month. And that was sort of the expectation at the time. We, of course, now find out we didn't know how bad it was. Half the cast is infected, half of Broadway is infected. We basically pretty much all infected each other in the months preceding the official cast, and they're finding out that it was spreading in New York City in January and February. I had one of the worst flus I've ever had. I really wanted to get tested to find out if I had it. But we're all just sort of kind of past the denial phase into sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say anger phase, but we're definitely kind of still consoling each other and trying to deal with this new normal. Everyone is sort of, we live, to where we chose this career knowing that, we connecting with people and everything that we're about and that we do for a living is been pulled away from us. So I think there's a lot of virtual substitution, which we had with the Zoom and stuff like that, that people are just still trying to stay connected. But I think the biggest thing is anxiety. All of Broadway, as you know, is one of the big venues that bring people together. Is the whole point of it, the whole joy of it. And between us and sports arenas and things like that, we're told we're going to be some of the last back in maybe 2021. And so I think there's an anxiety about that. Like, when do we go back? And I think they had an interview with an equity head and she said, we have to get this right because we can't afford to go back and all the expense of starting back up again. And if people are too afraid to come, if the audiences aren't there, and we have to shut down again, it could be really bad. So I would just say we're all kind of anxious and just trying to be there for each other, but it's unprecedented. So no one really knows how to deal with it.
And how do you get the communication? Are the producers contacting you? Is your union rep contacting you? Do you have to rely on Chris Cuomo?
These are great questions. I would say our producers have been very frank and very upfront with us. I don't know about every other show, but our producers, we just got started. Like, some shows haven't even started up. We at least got to open in the fall. So our producers have been very honest and they're very determined. So they give us whatever information they have, but it's, it's again beyond their control, a lot of it. We rely on the Broadway League of producers, and we rely on the unions to tell us, and it's all interconnected because everyone's kind of in talks. So like I mean, to be honest, I found out we were shutting down from my mom, who was watching football on TV the day we shut down. And I got a text in the middle of a Jagged Little Pill rehearsal saying, I think you're not going to have a show tonight. And then I found out, I mean, again, there was a lag time of communication and official ways to communicate. So we got an official communication about an hour later from our producers. And then our union emails started flooding in. So the union has been sending us periodic emails with updates, but the updates really only mirror what the government has been saying because they're the ones in charge. I mean, the union everyone would love to get back to work, but if the government says not safe, there's nothing we can do. So we get updates. I think the biggest other concern is healthcare. Healthcare is going to be a problem because, you know, there was talk about the producers ponying up the money, but you know, if there's no money coming in, and how long this goes, you know, we don't want to bankrupt the show and have no shows to come back to.
I should mention, we sort of dove right into this, and I didn't quite say that you're currently or on hiatus from being the associate conductor of Jagged Little Pill on Broadway. We glossed over that. I just want to catch everybody up.
Right, that's right.
And I wanted to say that I saw the show, and it's fantastic.
Oh, I'm glad you loved it.
Big plug for whenever this happens again, everyone should go see Jagged Little Pill and check out Matt Doebler in the pit. I had one more question about that, but I forget what it was. So it's going to come back to me in a second.
Okay.
But we're going to move on to our next question here, which is many of our students tuning in today are currently studying musical theater. Some of them are educators and some of them are students. And I want to know, like, how did you find music theater in the first place? Was your path to Broadway a linear one? And did you always want to be a music director?
This will be a kind of a long, convoluted story, so please just steer me in the right direction. But there's a point to it because musical theater found me, okay, interestingly. And I'm bringing up this story to show you how these kind of things happen. It is a lot of accidents. There are a lot of coincidences and just things that aren't planned. I did not go with, I mean, when I was growing up, there were almost no programs that said, take you to Broadway. Okay, there was not that many musical theater programs. There was a lot of like straight acting programs that maybe had some, you know, specialization. And there were certainly no music director / conductor, okay, thing that just didn't exist. Now there's master programs and there's other things you can do that. So I just, you know, I didn't even think that was an option. I grew up, just to date me, my first musicals were Cats, Les Mis, and Phantom, okay? The big ones, right? Those are my very first ones. And so you can imagine Cats as a kid was pretty surreal. But I grew up like kind of liking, I like Broadway, but I wasn't obsessed with that. I wasn't like super into it. I was into all kinds of different music, and I was very active in high school with chorus and band and all that kind of stuff. But I also did the shows. So believe it or not, I was an actor, not a great one, which I came to realize eventually. I was like model the Taylor and Fiddle on the Roof. Somewhere in a VHS tape in a dusty basement, there's video footage evidence that I hope never comes out. But then we did a show called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Okay, this is my first experience, which was going to prepare me for what would lie ahead. We got, back in the day, they rented you out the old 70s British version of that show. And it was for like a male narrator. We had cast a female narrator and all that kind of stuff. The only one, now this is before Donny Osmond. So the only one in existence was Laurie Beechman. And so we did, when I now come to find out was, I guess illegal, is we needed to update that version to be what we all liked, which was the 1982 Broadway version with Laurie Beechman. So I, while being in the show, also had to reorchestrate the show. I hadn't done that before. So that was like, I learned along the way, you know, and I listened and wore out the tape, listening to what it sounded like and redoing that. That was my first experience kind of doing that. And I kind of realized that like, I as much as I was on stage, I was a pianist and I like would sometimes go down and help out with the dance music playing or whatever. I just kind of realized I really liked the pit element of it, even though I wasn't there. So fast forward to college, I go to Penn State to be an engineer. I was not a music major. I was not intending to go to music. It was always going to be my fun hobby. And I lived on the floor with computer science majors, and I would program music into the computer. Back then you could just make it go beep. And everything I was doing was music. I did the glee club, concert choir, show choir, playing for that. And so anyway, my friends eventually had an intervention. They said, Matt, everything you do is music. Why are you doing computer engineering? So I switched my major. And when I did that, I had a friend come who was doing the Penn State Thespians, and they were doing the Mystery of Evan Drood. And they said, we want you to conduct the orchestra. I hadn't had a conducting class. I had never done this before. So I had like a 22-piece orchestra, and I did it. I learned along the way, and you know, I kind of got the bug. I switched my major to a BA in music, and that meant you could concentrate on what you wanted. So I was able to sort of adapt the electives to conducting and musical theater. As I finished that, the music theater program at Penn State was just starting up, and they needed a pianist. And they were borrowing people from the School of Music who could play rings around me, but they didn't know how to swing. They couldn't beef up dance. Like they didn't know how to like do what you need to do for musical theater styles. So they hired me part-time. When it got to be full house with the students, they hired me full-time. So I was the very first conductor / musical director at Penn State. And so that lasted about 6 years. My final year, we had artists come into Penn State from New York City, and like for guest, you know, master classes like that. And one of them was a guy named Craig Cornelia, who didn't have a lot of Broadway success, but you've heard some people's cabaret songs over the years. He's very popular because his songs have a journey and are very emotional and suit themselves for that. And he taught an acting class in New York City, and he said to me, you should move to New York City. And I'm going to give you a start because if you just show up without any connections, you know, and he gave me a name. That name and the number was Alex Lackamore, which you may have heard of because he runs the Hamilton Empire, all right? So I moved to New York and I call him up, doesn't return my call. He's a busy guy. You know, he's a great guy, but he's very busy. And who the hell am I? So I called again, and he knew Alex from because Alex had played for his classes. Now Alex was the associate conductor on Wicked. He won. I called him back a week later, and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, man. Yeah. Want to come visit? Come visit the pit? So within a month, I was in the pit of Wicked, which had open for a year. And Alex is a Mozart. So he said to me at the end, do you want to learn the show? And I was so intimidated, I tucked tail between my legs and said, I'll get back to you. So, because I mean, if you see Alex Lackamore in action, you're just like, what? I should go into botany, right? So I had moved with 2 actors from Penn State who had graduated, and they were taking class. They knew somebody who was teaching them acting class. She happened to be an ensemble member of Wicked. So she was my mole. And then a couple months later, she said, Matt, we're losing rehearsal pianists at Wicked. I want this is your time. So I called Alex Lackamore back and said, I'd like to come back. He goes, well, that's amazing. We just lost a rehearsal pianist. And so, okay, where are they? Okay, that's great. So he had me audition in Stephen Schwartz's apartment on his grand piano. Now, Stephen Schwartz wasn't there, thank God. He was probably way in Connecticut. So here I am in Stephen Schwartz's gorgeous apartment on 10th Avenue, and you know, playing the stuff. Anyway, Alex says, you're hired, learn the score, and by the way, I'm gonna have you learn to sub the key 1 part, because if you can play the rehearsal book, you can definitely do that. And by this point, Alex had graduated to be MD. Stephen Remus had left to do All Shook Up, so Alex is now the conductor. So I started learning the book, did that. A couple months later, I said, we're gonna be short a couple of guys for the summer. Would you like to learn to conduct Wicked? So within like 9 months of moving to the city, I was subconducting Wicked in Broadway. And so if any of those pieces don't happen, then this doesn't happen, is my point. So sorry for the long answer. But you can see it's zigzaggy and crazy and bizarro. Now, I would just say this, not once did I have to show a resume or even ask what college I was from. Now, but I'm not downplaying college, because here's the key to that, which is if I hadn't had my experiences at college at Penn State and all of my failures and my mistakes that I made, I would be much worse off, because I would be making those in New York, you know? And so I was able to do everything and grow and learn all that I needed to while at college, so that I had that, to help me not do the same thing when I was now being thrust upon a Broadway stage.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that entire story. That was really great. I will, what I want to say to, because the people listening out here are, they want to know how to get to Broadway. And you just told them, become an engineering major at Penn State, and then meet some guy that gives your name to some other guy, and then you'll be on Broadway. And that's exactly the path everyone should follow, right?
I would just say that I think the lesson to be learned is that, in some ways it's found me, is that so much, and then the work after that, by the way, I didn't update my resume for 7 years because everything I got was word of mouth and recommendation and networking. And sometimes I didn't even need to audition. Most of the times they just assumed I could. And so if I couldn't, I did. Nobody listened to, so I eventually, we'll get to this later, but I eventually did a show called The Great Comet where I would play accordion. Nobody asked me to play accordion. I had known that, I had that instrument, but no one asked to prove yourself. They just assumed I could. So, it's that kind of thing. But it was definitely the networking, word of mouth. That was the key to all of this.
It's just a really great story. I was, of course, being facetious.
No, of course you are. No, I know. But I mean, it's whack. That's why I told the whole story. It's just,
no, but what really is the salient point from here, and it's interesting, Matt, that we're hearing this a lot from people over the course of the studio series, and one of the biggest things that people say is that don't wait around for something to happen. Like, it is the work that you do that gets recognized, and it pulls you through a career, never in a linear fashion. Like, I don't think I've interviewed one person that said that they wanted this one thing and then they went for it and got it. Like, so for those of you out there that are studying musical theater as performers, this is very consistent about people who are in professional careers. It never goes from A to B to C. There's a Q and an R and then an X and then a 5. Like, it wanders everywhere. And I have to stop for 1 second and say, you and I are probably very similar ages because we have the same, but I have to tell you that I had the exact same experience on Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at the Apple Hill Playhouse in Delmont, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
and I remember
amazing.
Getting the score, and then like, where's the bum, 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 bum?
Oh, exactly.
And having to transcribe that. I had the exact same experience.
We should compare. I still have my music actually in a box somewhere. We should compare our
it's not on Finale. That's for sure. Okay, well, anyways, we're back to questions here. So I want to talk a little bit about Wicked. So you've had a long relationship with Wicked, and you worked with and Stephen Aramis, and you've worn a lot of hats with the company and been a part of many of the companies. So what is it like jumping in and out of an existing show? Like, you came in, you weren't part of it from the beginning. So it was a well-oiled machine. There was a way that it was done. What is that atmosphere like?
Okay, so yeah, most of, I think, your students' experiences are going to be, just because of the nature of the business, you're going to find yourself, maybe not most of the time, but a lot of the time, coming into a show that's already running, right? So Wicked had been running for a year, and it then became where it expanded very rapidly, and they were doing all sorts of having to hire cast for, future companies, etc. So when I was there, I actually went out on the tours. I covered vacations. I eventually went on tour 1 for 3 years, and then I quit to go back home, but instead got shipped off to tour 2, and then eventually became a musical director of tour 2 for a few months. We did a Canada swing, and then I was like, okay, I need to come back. I want to come back to New York and actually cut, because by then it had been like 4 years on the road. So I think the tough thing about that is, first of all, you're coming into an established show. So the show, after about, has settled into a kind of a pattern, a sort of a, what they're used to being. And so you are not one of the goals you want to come in and do is not disrupt the machine, right? In other words, you have to find a way, if you're a replacement person, besides like fitting the costumes or things like that, they are going to teach you the show, and they're not going to want you to like reinvent the show, because the show's already been invented, right? And now it's about like keeping it going and profitable and things like that. So you have to find a way to feel yourself artistically and be you and express yourself, but also kind of honor what has happened in the past already and what they have already established. So I think, like, for example, and there are things that are wicked that aren't still, I think, in the score that actually happened or in the script. There are things that Kristen Chenoweth did, and they become a thing. And they ask you to do that, if you're Glinda, to sort of do the same kind of jokes. I think the popular scene is what I'm talking about mostly, where there are just certain things that she did and now it becomes expected. And if you don't want to do that, that sort of like, it just throws a wrench in sort of what they're expecting. You have to find a way as an actress or an actor to justify what came before for yourself, so it comes across as honest. So that's why I say the word honor instead of imitate, because I think where I've seen Glindas fail, successive Glindas, is they just imitate, and then you can tell it's not genuine. Like you can tell they're just channeling a Kristen Chenoweth joke rather than making it organic. And humor is so tricky, right? And the Glinda part requires a lot of humor. And sometimes people will do all those silly, and like, kind of airhead and Legally Blonde kind of shtick, and it doesn't land. And it's because you can just tell they're not like absorbing it. So I think that's one of the hardest things to come into. And remember, when you come into a show, it's just you. It's a rehearsal pianist who may not do anything else with the show and may have no history of the show, and a dance captain. That's what you get. And you're in a room and you rehearse for 1 or 2 weeks, and then I'm sure you have this, you usually get part of thrown into an understudy run through with the rest of the cast, and then a put in where you get all the elements for you. Some of the technical, we didn't say all the elements, some of the technical elements. When I did Book of Mormon, we didn't have sound or anything. It was just a rehearsal piano. Wicked as a conductor and a pianist and drums. But that's your shot. That's all you get. So your experience is so different than putting up a brand new show. And when you go from different tours, some people are thrown around, the different tours, and you're expected, to sort of absorb what's happening in that tour. And I think what's hard about a show that has so many different companies is you have to learn the slight nuances that have happened with the show. Because some shows, like Tour 2 has less of a set than Tour 1, so they no longer have a little bridge that goes across where people can stand on. That changes your blocking. So let's say you're used to doing Wicked Tour 1 or Broadway, now you have different parameters. There's a creative team usually assigned, like resident directors or associate directors, that go out and try to keep all of the shows on track, okay, and like close enough, so that someone going to Broadway doesn't see a completely different reinterpretation or experience of the show than on the second national tour, as much as you can help it. And so you have to know, this tempo is a little slower, like that's not a click show. So as much as the music team will try to keep it in a range, you're jumping around and expecting to land on a beat or something, and the tempo's a little slower. You're gonna kind of feel that. So I think that's another part of the adjustment, is having to now absorb the slight idiosyncrasies and the personality of each company. Did that answer the questions?
It does. I actually want to go even further with that.
Okay.
I was on Les Mis for a long time. I did that show on Broadway for 5.5 years. And we had the same situation, a show that's been running for a long time. My question with Wicked is, well, this is really great. This information is so good, and people don't talk about it, because when people are almost over half of the time, when you're hired to do some big time production contract, you're replacing someone in a big show, right? The numbers are just there, right? So, but people don't necessarily train for this.
Correct.
What we get in our BFA programs is the training from the ground up, creating the characters. And I think that it can't be underestimated those of you listening here, how much you have to do yourself, right? Matt, you were saying that there's just a dance captain and some musician that may not be part of the staff at all, right? They
Yeah.
are making sure you sing the right notes and you're in the right place so a giant gear doesn't, you know, impale you, right? But like
Yeah.
character is all up to you, even at this high level, like creating your character. So my question is, how, I guess, transparent are they about creating character? I'll preface this by saying at Les Mis, the creative staff always said you have to create your own character. Don't try to imitate. Don't try to do the person that came before you. We want this to be your own. But they never really meant it, right? What they wanted was the way that you did it before. But they knew that stifling an actor's creativity was also not good. So actors were very confused about like how far do you go creating, putting your own spin on something, and then how far do you go honoring what's there. And you've coached a lot of wicked performers. How do
Yes.
you get someone who just does the sticky imitator to do the honor, and where does that balance go?
I mean, this is all great stuff. So I think there's been a lot of actor angst about that bait and switch. Okay, I think they get told that because, you know, I mean, look, no one wants it to not be artistic. I mean, you know, it just, but it's a pure situation. It's a business, and you just don't have the time. What they don't want is for Steven Schwartz to come out and be like, or the director, Joe Mantello. Let's say Joe Mantello comes out. Because again, he's not directly involved anymore most of the time. If he comes out and is like, why is that person, and let's say it's even the ensemble, why is that person in the ensemble doing that weird thing? You know, like, why is this sticking out to me? Why is this not what I was used to? You know, they don't want to, you know, you don't want to stick out to the point where you're creating a distraction. I mean, one time we decided, there's an actor who decided he had I forget the names, the guy, but he wheels out Fierro, and he says 2 lines, and the creative team was out there, and this actor decided he wanted this character to be British for some reason. Well, that made them really upset because you don't get to do that. That's not what the show was. You know what I mean? So here's someone expressing their creativity and being like, well, I think I'll be British today. You know, it's like, you can't do that. Because you're trying to give, again, the same audience experience, you know, relative. So I say that even despite what they tell you, again, you know, you can, there's just a line, this is why it's an art. There's no real defining place, you know. You have to feel the room. And I do say that they start out with the dance captain and the music, you know, but you do get taught, well, actually, I guess I've taught vocalists not being a part of the show per se, but you usually get taught by the associate conductor or musical director apart. And then eventually, like, the stage manager will come in and maybe direct you if you're a lead and not an ensemble person. So, but you know, again, and they've been around maybe from the beginning, hear what the director is saying and channel what the director has said. Often you'll get the associate director pop in. So you'll get people who will help you, but you really do have to find it within, like you said. And I think what it is, what I'm trying to, my point is, if they say, because of the lights moving and traffic, that you have to go from this part of the stage to this part of the stage, and you feel like you wouldn't do that as a character, that it's too bad, because you're going to get run over or you're going to be out of your light, and they're not going to reprogram the show and reblock the show for you. So what I'm saying is, that's where you come in with the creativity, where you have to come in and justify and say, okay, I have to come up with a motivation for why I would do this and make that work. Because otherwise, like I said, there's not the resources or the time to make it be like, you know, and this, we'll get into this later in the interview, but this became a problem on a future show of mine, you know, where somebody came in and wanted to reimagine the character. And it was like, we have 2 weeks and then you're in this. Anyway, so I think it is up to you. You don't have any resources. You may get a rehearsal or two with the associate director before you're on, and some tips. But it does have to come from you, and the justification of your action, you have to get creative in that sense for yourself. And again, there's little tiny things you can do and moments. You know how things evolve, etc. But if you just go wild and way out of lane, you're gonna get smacked, and then you're gonna get hurt, you know. And like I said, that's where these are the X ranking. Like, well, I can't. They told me to do this, and now they're saying they keep steering me back into this narrow lane.
Right. I think it's a great example. I think we all can understand that like a cross doesn't need to be made, or else we're going to be impaled by a set piece. But I think I'm glad you brought up that doing those two lines in a British accent, because you know that doesn't harm anyone, right? No one gets killed because someone does a British accent, and it probably cracked up the cast too, right?
Oh, I mean, I cracked up in the pit.
Exactly, right? So what's the harm? What's the foul? And there is, right? Could you just what's the harm and what's the foul? I'm so.
I mean, if you did it in a rehearsal to try it out, you know, it's like that's one thing. If you're creating a, you know, it's just that in a show, and it just was bad timing because the creative team was there and they are expecting to see not that many variances, you know, because there's also the feeling of control. You know, when they ship out a tour, it's like out of their hands, and they're expecting the stage manager and the musical director and that dance captain set to maintain all of those elements. And so when they come, there's a bit of a nervousness, like, oh, you know, I haven't been here in a few months. Like what shape is the show in? Is this the show that, you know, Joe Mantello wanted to happen on opening night? And so the more of those kind of deviances, the more stress involved, shall we say.
Yeah, well, I think you hit upon a really great point. You know, when the marquee goes up in Seattle, Washington of the tour of Wicked, it doesn't say directed by Joe Mantello and that guy that pushed the wheelchair.
Right.
Right? It says Joe Mantello, like it is his creation.
Correct.
So futzing with his creation would be like, maybe, you know, let's say you're an actor and you submitted the self-tape and someone along the way, you know, overdub someone else's voice. Like it's their creative work, and you have to honor their creative work.
Yeah, now mind you, Joe Mantello may not have ever visited the company, maybe a couple times, because he's busy doing some other thing, you know, like, and so he really trusts his associate director to channel that. So, but you're right, despite the fact that he's not there, his name's on the product, and everyone working underneath him, their task is to keep up what he did, maintain what he said.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the birth of the middle management in Broadway shows is really important for those of you listening. Like when you're doing a show at your college or at your local theater, there's a director and they direct the show, you put up the show and you close the show. You know, it never runs so long that it needs to be maintained by someone who wasn't the director themselves, right? So, and it's what's ironic, and this may be true of Joe, I've never worked with Joe, but it certainly was true of Hal Prince on Phantom, and it was certainly true of John Caird and Trevor Nunn. They are actually way more flexible about creating your own choices in rehearsal, which must be frustrating to the associate directors who are told never to let anything change. Is that true of Wicked as well?
Yes, it is very ironic. I mean, I don't know if I had a direct interaction with Joe because, you know, again, he's so far up, but I have observed that with future shows and shows with Mobile Company. They definitely, I think the associate director, and also, but even the musical directors underneath the musical supervisors are like, no, it needs to be like this, and the music supervisor can be like, oh no, you can sing that extra optional note, and you're like, like what? You know, and there's definitely, that happens once in a while, but I think 98% of the time, it's not, you know, you play the safe zone for sure. You stay within there. Yeah, but you're right.
Well, I think it's important to note that the associate director is kind of in the same boat as you are.
Yes.
Right? Like they have to honor the show as well. And so when they say you can't do that in a British accent, it's not because they don't like it or because it's not a good choice or it's not funny. It's because they are honoring the original work. So,
to tail on that, musically, for example, Elphaba, you know, part of the style, you know, adds, you know, is maybe not singing exactly what's on the page, but they, you know, some people start to riff and have little things, and that became sort of a battle with musical directors, like how much do you allow the riffing before someone upstairs says, you know, like see Remus or somebody else says, whoa, that's like way beyond, you know, where that's okay. So we actually had to end up with what we called approved riffs that somebody had done, that Steven or Alex or people along the way liked enough that they said, okay, if you want to do this, you can do this, and you can pull it off, and it's approved. But it doesn't mean you can make like everything else. And you know, I mean, I remember one time, I won't say who, but there was a replacement album on Broadway, and Alex Lacamoire, she did some crazy riff, and Alex was noting in the house, and he said he just threw his notebook behind him because he was just, you know, blown off his chair by the riff. And he's like, I'm still here, even though I'm not conducting. Like, you can't just do and sing any note, even though I thought it was amazing. You know, it sounded amazing. But again, it's not control. You just can't let it. Every you know, once you get one person doing a British accent, someone else doing a mega riff, someone says, oh, well, then I can just do this. And before you know it, it's, you know, that's why.
Well, as they say, spontaneity always has its time and its place.
You just got to know when. Yeah. Read the room.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yes, well, and ironically, right, we just talked to Stephen Schwartz last week, and he said straight to everybody on listening, he said, oh yeah, I love when people do stuff with my work. You know, you don't have to stick to the ink.
See, you know, but you know, exactly. So you're, you know. Yeah.
It's tough. It is definitely part of the job. And I have to say, I don't know if this is true of Wicked too, but there are actors, actresses that are really good at that, really being good at being creative within the confines of what is expected. And then there are some who are very creative and just can't bear the constraints. They have to do their own thing. And those people just shouldn't do long shows.
I completely agree. Like, yes. Yeah, we're all built for different things, and not everything is going to fit in the same, you know, container. That's great. That's okay. That's why there's a lot of different kind of things out there, you know, opportunities and shows. And
yeah. So from Wicked, you worked on other hits like Book of Mormon, but you also started to work on new musicals and developmental projects. So can you speak about the difference between being a replacement in an already existing show versus being part of the creative process in a new show? So a little bit from your point of view, but even more from an actor's point of view. What should students expect when rehearsing to replace someone in a blockbuster that we already talked about, versus when you're doing something for a reading or a workshop, or even the rehearsals of a new show?
So the advantage of people who do readings and workshops are that we value fast learning. Okay, so like if you're a musician, I want singers who can read, sight read, or at least hold harmony, be able to go, or if not, at least be able to tape it, go home, learn, and come back in and be solid. Because it's like you learn all the music in a show in like 2 days, if you're lucky, and then like that you might get a brush up, and then you gotta go. So I imagine choreography, same thing. You know, I imagine that dancers, the ones that can pick up combos quick, and just be fast learners, that's valued because time is at a premium. So not every show has the same path, but I'll give you sort of a generalized thing. So first of all, we start out with like the 20-hour reading, which is like a week. And I mean, there's no budget. People usually get paid the $100 Metro card for the week or something. You know, it's like a token. It's very, very small scale, and it's just to put everything together for the first time, see, and almost like read through the show. Now they become more elaborate. What's kind of unfortunate is that people have lost their imagination. There's a little bit of a competition, and now 20-hour readings sometimes become like practically staged and with orchestras. And you know, back when I started in New York, a 20-hour reading, even for like a big show, was piano, and you sat on chairs and stands. You might have gotten up and did dialogue, but it was very like low key. Now it's like crazy. And now these workshops that they're doing have become full elaborate sound system, full blocking costumes, choreography in New 42 Studio. So, but when you start with 20-hour reading, it's almost like call your buddies up, call your friends up. Hey, you know, I think this person would be great for this. And the director's like, you know, it would be good for this. And so, because there's no budget for auditions. You might have auditions if you have rich producers, but they're not going to be rigorous because you're just trying to get people to do it for practically free. So now you do that. And then you see what you have. And then there's lots of rewriting, stuff like that. Then you come back and often do like a workshop. okay, which is like or a lab now they call it or whatever, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. And this is where things start to really happen. Most of this kind of stuff, like for example, the meat of like a show like Great Comet or Jagged Little Pill, like happened in a workshop or off Broadway, right? The process for these kind of things happen. So you're actually getting paid very little still, but more than a 20-hour reading to do so much work. Everybody, the actors, the creative team, the writing staff. It's probably the most painful, I don't want to say painful, it's very, very stressful, and it's very, very, you're just very busy, and there's so many changes happening at once, and it's where everything really, really starts to come together, and you start to get an idea of what the show is going to be. So for workshops, then you start having auditions and getting people that you hope will get through the rest of the way. And I will just say that the retention rate varies from a show like Jagged Little Pill, where we kept like 98% of our cast all the way through. That's very rare. Diana is very loyal. To a show I did out at the Old Globe called The Heart of Rock and Roll, where between like a workshop out of town tryout and future workshop, we lost 50% of the cast. You know, again, not reflecting necessarily badly on them, but the needs of the show changed, characters got written out, responsibilities changed. So there's a lot of varying degrees of retention and how quickly those shows evolve between those settings. So you have auditions for the workshop, and you get together and you do all that and you get through that, and then you sort of, again, you reevaluate what we have, and then the next step would be to go to like an off-Broadway thing or a regional theater, okay, like the Old Globe, like ART, where now you have your maybe out-of-town tryout, you call it, where you put it on speed. And so you take what you learn from the workshop and go from there. Now, again, you may lose some people from the workshop. They might get other gigs. They might not want to go out of town, etc. So that kind of process, it's very collaborative. In the workshops is where we can talk about the meat of that kind of stuff happens. The writers are often in the room, but not always, but often, and how you bring something to a character, they might catch, this happens a lot in TV too, especially, TV a lot, where the writers catch something you do that only you could do, and your uniqueness in the interpretation, they say, oh, what about that? We can go in that direction, or let's amplify that. And so that's where your creativity really gets rewarded, because they don't know the writers only know what's on the page and what may be in their head. And when you get cast, you represent something that they think they want the character to be. And you may end up fulfilling what they want to be, but you may also end up changing their minds and being like, oh my gosh, that's what I wanted. I didn't even realize I wanted that, but that's better than what I thought. And so then they put that in the script, or you mess up. I can't tell you how many times someone screwed up a line, and there was no shame. We all, it happens, it's rehearsal. But the line script was better than what was in the page, and that became in the script. And that's why when there was this like lab rat equity strike about workshops, and there's all sorts of sides of that. But one of the things I certainly agreed with was that writers absolutely are the writers, but to say that the actors don't contribute to what happens, and even in some of the dialogue, that's not true. I mean, I've seen it happen. And writers are usually not so like, oh my God, not over, no, don't change, they're trying their best too. They're throwing stuff to the wall and see what sticks. I mean, I can't even tell you the number of cut songs from Wicked I've heard that thankfully they were cut, because, and I mean, Steven Schwartz will acknowledge, I mean, he's probably acknowledged that some of the stuff was just see what sticks, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, change it. So I think the workshops, I don't want to say it's like painful. It's just, it's very, very involved and very collaborative, and just there's a lot of change that happen at once to absorb. But it also creatively, where I think a lot of them needs to happen. So you as an actor or an actress can definitely really kind of flex yourself. Now, it doesn't mean you can just go off page. It's again, threading that needle and finding that thin line where you're taking what they want, but then maybe not quite giving them what they want. And either if they don't like it, they'll take it back. If they like it even more, that becomes the show. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think people get punished for that. And to be honest, this is the point I want to make in general. If people are not like that, or you don't like that atmosphere, you don't want to work with them, then that's not where you belong. It's not where you want to work. You don't want to work where you feel like you're being, kind of squished, So I think that you sort of find each other, shows and actors and people kind of find each other and end up where they need to be.
That's amazing. So I want to switch over to the fact that you joined Tasha Pierre and the Comet of 1812 during its off-Broadway run. On Comet, you worked with Tony Award-winning director Rachel Chafkin. What can you share with us about how she runs a ship, her directing style, and the atmosphere of her rehearsal rooms?
Sure. So Rachel Chafkin is somebody you definitely want to work for. If you get the chance, leap at it. I joined in the middle of Off-Broadway, and so that was a show that was already in motion. And then we took it to, and I didn't really see much of Rachel then because I was a replacement subconductor. And then we took it to ART where I got to really work with her every day. All I can say about Rachel is that she is going to be one of the best directors you've ever worked with. She is somebody who just commands respect in the room and is somehow always positive, but not in like that kind of where you don't deserve it way, like she's not fake. She treats everyone with respect no matter what position you are. So I was not the musical director, I was the associate. But anytime I was at the piano, instead of the musical director, she never treated it differently. She never like had this like, oh, well, it's not, the main guy. Oh, it's not, having to like dumb down or kind of, talk down or sort of maybe like, are you sure you got this? She just acted as if I could do my job. And so she just treated me like, okay, Matt, let's take it from whatever. And it was like no difference than how she treated anyone else. And she's like that with everybody in the room. And so we also did, interestingly enough, we did that out of town track at ART as well as Jagged. So I know that area very well now. And we had some major technical difficulties because the scope of the show expanded so greatly. We had some major sound issues, and we were using a show for the tracks. We had like some of the Dave Malloy sort of extra orchestra tracks that we played on top of, mostly kind of like electronic music stuff. And we were using a program called QLab that just couldn't handle the extra load. And we needed somebody to reprogram it into Ableton, which now you've all heard of, because it's everywhere. But we had to fly up a programmer. Anyway, we didn't get to run the show. We never had a dress rehearsal. We never had run the show. We didn't know how long the show was, like how long the show length lasted, until we had first preview. So, like, we didn't know what was going to happen. And so I was like, again, I'm not the musical director. I'm up in my corner in the audience with my accordion, like, but I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what's going to happen? Like, I was so stressed. And of course, I'm sure the musical director was stressed, and he's down center in front of everybody. And we were just like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Rachel never showed stress. She was just like, it's going to be fine. Like, that was her vibe. And so we were like, well, if she's not, which maybe she was, I'm sure she would, but she did it. She was still like a leader. And so we're like, well, if Rachel thinks it's going to be okay and she's not worried, I guess, why am I worried? Why am I freaking out? And it was just like, so, and you know what? It was a crazy show, but we made it all the way through and, went on from there. It was, and so that's the kind of leadership, that, as we know, is probably absent in other areas of the country right now. But the whole point is, I don't get political, but it's like having somebody who just through the really trying times remained steadfast and patient and just said, okay, I'm going to accept this is what it's going to be. And it's going to be what it is, and it's going to be fine. And so I would say that was like sort of my most, that was definitely one of the memories that stuck out in my mind about her. I mean, her ideas are brilliant. I mean, if you haven't seen 80s Town, whenever we come back, you should definitely see that. Ticket prices may now be affordable for that show, as well as ours. So I think she just, besides just having great ideas and being a wonderful collaborator, it's just, there was never a level. It just never felt like a hierarchy, where someone was less than someone else. She realized every person's role was important.
That's amazing. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Diane Paulus too. So Diane Paulus is the director of Jagged Little Pill, and you were in this from the very early stages, from its readings beyond. What can you say about her style and process?
So, and Diane is another, equally, but in style-wise, completely different director, and someone, again, I hope you all get a chance to work with, and she's been wonderful. She, I would say that, well, first of all, I'll go with the history of the show. When we started, that we had a 20-hour reading, which I was not a part of, which had Adina Menzel as the lead.
Really?
Okay. Yes, and Adina's amazing and wonderful. I've gotten to work with her briefly on a couple things. She was gone from Wicked, but I have interacted with her and other things, and she's wonderful. When it came time to do the run, she had lost her voice, and the musical director had to sing her part for the reading. That's the kind of stuff that happens, right? Afterwards, because of scheduling and because of other factors, it just felt like it wasn't quite the right match. It had nothing to do with her, and they felt that they didn't need some kind of what they would call, star celebrity kind of thing, which Adina admittedly is, to do the show. The show was going to exist on its own, and Jagged Little Pill would be the draw, the star, which I think was the right move, because the way the show is constructed, you've seen the way the show is constructed and the way the show is it exists. It shouldn't have that. It should be, and the actors we all have are the most perfect people for those parts, and to the point where you believe. I'll tell the story publicly. I thought Elizabeth Stanley was married and had kids because she was so realistic as a mom. I come to find out, I had it in my head, I confused it with someone else, and I believed her. I just really was convinced she was drawing upon being a parent. She was that convinced. So that's how well cast the show is. Diane is somebody who will take the collaboration to a level I've never seen with anybody else. If you notice, the Cindy Larby, who's our choreographer, is also credited with movement direction, because the show, Diane likes a lot of flow. If you've seen Waitress and you've seen her shows, she likes a lot of things moving around and set pieces and things like that, very organic, And so she really, leaned heavily on our choreographer to help out in areas where a choreographer may not be asked to do. And in terms of some of the directions like that. And so that's why he gets the credit to help, because the show is so complex. But Diane will sometimes actually take a rehearsal and be like, you know what, if the scene doesn't seem to be working, with the writer in the room, who was also amazing, she would say to the actors, you know what, just play, just improv right now. What would you say? And then she'll take lines that they said and go to tell the book writer, use that. That's great. So again, back to the Equity Lab Rat strike, there you go. There's another example where we had dialogue that the cast members made up, and the writer was told by the director, put this in. So and sometimes Diane's own dialogue. Diane will say, there are lines where Diane will be like, I feel like this person would say this, or she, whatever. And those are in the script for Jagged Little Pill that are her quotes. So I would say, in terms of collaboration, in the audition room, I feel like Diane, it's one of these things. Another piece of advice I can give you about auditioning is that you can't control, the 99%, what somebody else, how somebody else connects with you, or if somebody's going to like you. In this business, I have tried my best to get people to like me who just, they're never going to. Like, we don't have that chemistry, we don't have that compatibility. It's not something you can even put down in an equation or something mathematical. It's part of our humanity. It's part of our, that sort of intangible thing you can't really measure. So in audition room, when it comes to who responds to you or not, I couldn't tell you what Diane responds to or not. Like, I can't give you she likes some people who sing this way or act this way. She either connects to you or don't. And if she connects to you, she's going to push like hell for you and going to hire you. And I don't know what the pattern is. I'm sure some of it has to do with people's bringing out their honesty and their humanity and their genuineness in their acting.
You know, I would say Rachel and Diane can definitely read fakes, right? They can tell if you're acting rather than being. And so, but Diane really, she either just responds to you or not, and she will just really, the people that she connects with, she will say, what can we do, you know, in the other fields, dancing or singing, to make this work? Is there any way to make this work? You know, so she'll really stick up for you. And so I would say she's incredibly loyal. I mean, she's been incredibly loyal to me. She's fought for me to keep me on through everything, because, you know, she's that kind of a person as well. So
That's great.
And kind of a non-answer for an answer, but
no, that's great. It's very, very helpful. I want to turn to Tom Kitt. You've worked with Tom Kitt, who's a composer and arranger, who, by the way, is appearing this Wednesday on the SDSU Studio Series. And you worked with him on Almost Famous and now Jagged Little Pill. What is it like working on a music team with him? And how much was Alanis Morissette involved in the Jagged Little Pill?
Sure. I will let Tom speak about some things in his ensuing thing. I will say this about Tom, who has also been amazing. Tom wears, this is actually a reality of how things work. Tom wears many hats, right? For Jagged, he's the music supervisor and arranger and orchestrator, okay? So to be frank, you didn't see a lot of Tom Kitt in the room because he was busy rearranging or orchestrating, right? I'm not saying he was definitely there, but he wasn't there obviously as much as a musical director. And he would pop in for sure, and he had notes and incredible things to say and all that kind of thing. But he is, I remember one day in rehearsal in a workshop, Diane said, we need an overture. We don't have an overture. We can't start the show like this. You know, and so Tom had to go home in the middle of rehearsal and overnight, I don't think he slept, write our overture so we could have it the next morning. You know, so he's doing that kind of thing. Both Tom and my music director, Brian, again, they also work on many other shows. Tom is so prolific. He's got Flying Over Sunset, that was about to debut at Lincoln Center. He's working on Almost Famous. They're off-Broadway, The Visitor. You know, he's working on 4 or 5 different shows, so he is a great delegator. He puts so much trust into the musical directors underneath him, like Brian, and even myself. For example, in the audition room nowadays, in the past year and a half, if you went in there, you were very likely not to see Tom, or even Brian, who's also very busy. You would see me behind the table. So, like, that's a couple of notches down the ladder, right? And I'm the one that's going to determine. Now, we usually send a video for approval, but we've already vetted everybody, and we've sent maybe 2 or 3 people, and usually highlight our favorite. And 98% of the time, they say, let's go with your recommendation. They'll see the video, and they'll say, okay, that sounds great. You know, like that's great. So that's, I would say, if anything, it's that he is a great delegator, and he's able to offload a lot of that responsibility. But he'll pop in and have grand things to say, and it's his vision, it's his, you know, whether it's his composition, like on Almost Famous, or if his arrangements, you know, he's going to, I mean, he was definitely there every time I was in Almost Famous rehearsal, which I was just pinch hitting for a little while. He was definitely there because he's the composer, so he had a lot more hands-on, had to be active and in the room kind of thing. But you know, he's a rare gem too. He's just so easy to work with, and he is willing to try different things, and I'm just amazed because people will be like, write this, do this, and he's like, done. You know, he just comes back. He go out of the room for an hour and come back and has crazy vocal arrangements that are incredible. And so it's one of those things. But as a music supervisor, he really is just spread across so many different things that he just trusts the people he's hired are going to maintain the show. So again, he'll probably talk to you more about the kind of stuff. But I would just say that you are not likely to see him only because he has to split between 4 or 5 different shows, which is why I'm very happy to be on the Tom Kitt, you know, coattails, because, you know, keep writing, dude, keep writing, you know. Anyway.
Right. Well, before we move on to the Pivot questionnaire, I want to talk a little bit about auditions. So you've witnessed thousands of auditions over the years as an accompanist, an assistant, and now associate Broadway music director. What can you tell me about what makes a successful audition?
Well, if that's not a loaded question, let's see. I mean, okay, there's so many things. So let me try to start. I would say, first of all, it's not a freaking recital. Okay, it's not a recital. The people who come in and like do the perfect, you know, blah blah blah. It's like it's not real. It's not. It just comes across as, you know, we're not interested in perfection. And the you know, I think the problem is people get very obsessed about the wrong things. Okay, because let's say you make a mistake. Well, first of all, or you know, when I say like they come in like an audition, the opposite is coming in so casual. You're like, hey Matt, who I've never met you. Hey Matt, how are the kids? You know, like, and like they've done research on you. You know what I mean? And like they're trying to be your best friend. That's not real either. You know what I mean? Like no one's buying that. You're being so casual. And you know, just be real. You walk into a room with people you don't know. Hey, what's up? How are you? Know, whatever. Or if you know somebody, acknowledge that. That's fine. I know many people who come in and say hi, you know, and they don't know stuff. So that's fine. But you know, so I think that the part of the thing is you walk in the door and it's instantly you're not you. You know, it's just if people who come in and sing their song like, hey guys, look, we know what's up. We're here to try and hire somebody. You know, and I know there's the whole cliche, which is true, about they need you behind the table. We do, of course, like our job is here. So make our job easier. What I think where people make a mistake is they make our job more difficult. And then that gets annoying, and then we're less likely to want to hire you, you know, because you're wasting our time. If you come in with your book and you have 50,000 songs in it, and you don't know what's in your book, and you spend 2 minutes paging through, you're wasting our time behind the table, you know, and like that's annoying. And so like it immediately puts you in a bad light. Now you may wow us and change our mind, but that's like one of the first things. But let me get back to the whole thing about the recital and perfection. People freak out if they make a mistake. And I as much as, you know, and you're a musical director, you know, you understand it. I don't like to say this because I don't want it to be true. I want people to be able to sing accurately and do the right thing and not worry that they're not going to be able to do things accurately, okay? But when you make a mistake, it's not that we necessarily think you don't know how to learn music or prepare. What happens is we're so distracted by the mistake and having to like adjust it in our heads that it distracts from being able to evaluate you. And this also goes for the lines, right? The line readings. If you make a mistake, it just immediately we have to like, for a second, we're just kind of like, oh wait, well, what's going on? And so that's why it's important for you to learn things as accurately as you can and do the best job you can, because otherwise we're sort of like, our brains are getting not able to focus on, are you right for our show? Which is what we're looking for, right? And so, and then don't make a big deal out of it. You know, if you crack, if the director wants you, the first thing they do is turn to the musical director and say, think you can get that to work in 6 months? Should we change the key? You know, we will fight to get you if you're what we want, if you're right for what our show is. If we think you're the perfect person, we will kind of, unless we can't. I mean, there are things where it's like, I'm sorry, changing that key ruins the rest of the number, or that makes it impossible for whatever. And then the director's like, you know, like then it's very painful to have to take you off the consideration table. But if we can make it work, we will. Also, sometimes music and sides are giving you last minute. So we understand that you may not have had the chance. I think it's less of an excuse now though, because now we're required to give you notes with accompaniment and accompanying recordings, at least on Broadway, that you're required to like learn all of the stuff. But if you're given like 30 pages, you know, of music to learn, we understand if it's not going to be perfect. We don't need that. We need to know that the mistakes you're making are just because of the situation we all know you're in, rather than you're not a hard worker, you don't have the ability, you just, whatever the reason is. So don't just know that we all know what the situation is. We know these auditions are last minute, and sometimes auditions can last and callbacks can last for like a week or two if we see that you're still making mistakes in the music by the end of week 2, then we start to worry, right? If you haven't gotten better. But there are also auditions where, like for Jagged, we had somebody leave the cast very quickly. We had to, or for a leave of absence, we had to audition them on a Thursday. We had callbacks on a Friday, and they started rehearsal on Monday. Okay? So we know you were given no time to learn the music. But if you make a big deal like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and you apologize, or I'm sick, we can tell you're sick. You know, we know you're sick. We can, you know, like, you don't need to do any of that, you know, because that doesn't help us evaluate you. It doesn't, you know, and that just makes it instantly tense. If you make a mistake or if you come in the room and get weird with us, then we're going to feel weird and we're going to have a weird vibe back. And so, you know, and I guess the other thing I want to say is people leave. I've noticed people, because I said I lived with 2 actors when I first moved to New York. People think that what happens in your audition room and you leave, that we're obsessing over it for like the next 10 days. We're not. Like, you're gone from our thought after you leave, because the next thing is we're on to the next person, or we're looking at the lunch menu for what we want, or we're like, think we can get out of here in time to get, you know, the express train home. I mean, like, that's reality, you know, like we're wanting to be as efficient as possible. And so we're not obsessing about it. I mean, I think I'll tell this favorite story. There was somebody who came in for an EPA for Wicked, and it was a male identifying, and he was a countertenor and sang Defying Gravity in the key, the original key. And like, it was very creative and very memorable because I'm telling the story, but I don't know that guy's name. I'm not going to recognize him when he walked in. You know, like, we're not going to hold a grudge forever because you came in and cracked a note. You know, every single person that is in this world and on this, you know, video Zoom is unique, and there's no one else like you. The paradox is there's also a million people who are doing this, and there are thousands that audition, you know, hundreds that audition in a day. And so you're also like this very insignificant blip that is just gone because we have to focus on the next person. So we're not obsessing like you are afterwards about how you're auditioning. And so I wish people would just sort of just throw that weight off their shoulder and just realize that, you know, you're going to get another chance. You didn't blow it because something went wrong. I wouldn't mind also talking about the difference between EPA and the regular auditions and agents real quick. When you have EPAs and ECCs, there's a couple things I want to talk about. One of which is that you have a very short time to express yourself. And so that's also, again, something that, you know, when we say like 16 bars, we really mean 30 to 40. What'd you say?
Can you just explain what an EPA stands for and an ECC?
Okay, Equity Principal Audition.
There you go.
You sign up for like 2-minute slots, and you're given a chance to sing what we are thinking for principal replacements. There are pros and cons to this. One is that the Equity likes to say, you know, we're presenting these to you because it gives you a chance to be seen. Unfortunately, if the show's not looking for replacements, it kind of feels a little like, why are we doing this on both sides, right? Which is depressing. However, I will leave this tip to you. One time I was in EPA for a big casting agency, won't say who it is, but it's one of the big ones. And the casting director, we were auditioning Rent, I think the Rent tour or something. And we had people come in and we're completely wrong for Rent. So you also get that whole like, well, know what you're auditioning for and don't, you know, whatever. But she was also casting whatever Broadway Christmas show was on that day. And it was that season later on, which was Elf or Christmas Story, the musical. So she actually was using the EPA. She didn't need anyone for Rent, but she had a pile of people she was going to bring back for this Broadway Christmas show. So it also goes to show sometimes, you know, and like Diane, when we have Jagged Little Pill auditions, she's also thinking 1776, her next project. So you may not be right for that, but we may be using the casting director and be like, aha, what about this one? So anyway, you do these EPAs, you sign up, and then you have the equity course calls, ECCs, where we're auditioning, you know, for ensemble. And again, 16 bars, He goes 30 to 40 seconds. Usually that's equity chorus call. EPAs are usually 32 bars, and that's like a minute to a minute 20. So you don't need to cut yourself off at the dominant cadence and never finish, you know? Be like, and then nothing, you know, and then you don't sing the final note because it's the 17th bar. I know some regional theaters like get really jerky about that. That drives me crazy. Like, just give us the 30 to 40 seconds. Don't do like, well, this song is in 8/8 time at quarter beat 40, so therefore I'm gonna do 16 bars and take up 2 minutes of your life. Or I'm gonna do this really fast waltz and be over in 10 seconds. And you're like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to evaluate you. And that's the other, I think that's the other audition mistake, is come in with a strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of what you wanna do. Because there's nothing more painful than, I don't know what to do with that. You're very talented, but you're just kind of, yeah, I don't, you know. And I think the other thing I can tell you is in college, I know this is a bad word for understandable reasons, typing, but that's what casting directors do because it's the most efficient, and it's, and so you're constantly being typed. I'm not saying you have to type yourself, and you can try and expand boundaries and all that kind of stuff. That is what college is for. But in the end, just know you're going to be typed. And if we can't type you, if you're very talented and we want to put you somewhere, we may change the type of the character we're looking for. But a lot of times we just say, I don't know where this person goes. And that's very deflating because there are people just like, I wish I could work with you. You sound great, but there's nowhere for you in our show. So anyway, you have these auditions, and then you have what are called the invited calls. If you have an agent, let's talk about agents for 1 second. If you have an agent, all the agent can do for you is get you to the invited call, the agent invited call. So you skip a step. And so if you don't do the EPAs and the ECCs, if you succeed in those and get passed on, then you find yourself the next day in the room with all the invited calls. So an agent saves you that step, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get a job because you don't have an agent at the moment. I know many people have gotten work from EPAs and ECCs. Okay, the odds are slim, but not zero. It's like playing a lottery. If you don't play, you don't win, 0% chance of winning. Anyway, you do these invited calls, and then you do the callback. So that's kind of how that stuff works, right? Is the agent can sort of give you through that shortcut. And I know some people who are fed up with their agents aren't very good, which there's many who are not, and they don't to promote them or aren't able to get them a slot. So they'll show up to the EPAs on their own and ECCs and just try to get in that way, you know? So that's kind of how those auditions work. And like I said, you know, as you're progressing through the auditions, if it's a long thing, you should be getting better at every audition, but you should also be being consistent. The other thing we're looking for, directors are looking for, is how directable you are. Are you consistent within the week? Or am I going to get the British accent in day 3 and be like, I don't know what to predict, right? So you want to make sure that you're as consistent as possible while growing, so that they know you're going to be able to give a consistent performance 8 times a week, right? I think that's another key factor that we're looking at.
This is great. I mean, I wish we could go on and on and on and talk to them.
Sorry, I know.
And everything. No, this is really great. It's just fantastic. But we're going to move on to the Pivot questionnaire here. And these 10 questions originally come from a French series called Bouillon de Culture, hosted by Bernard Pivot. But they're better known as the questions that Jim Lipton asked every guest at the end of his Inside the Actors Studio television show. So there are 10 questions, and it begins with number 1, which is, what is your favorite word?
Slayer. You're not going to get that from anyone else.
Nope, that's unique. What is your least favorite word?
Canceled.
Which
might be apropos for this environment we're in right now.
Yes, unfortunately, you're true. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally? 2
things. Talent is a real turn on, actually. Talent in every category. That to me is a magnet, and somebody's ability to channel it. Okay, honestly, without reservation. And I would say the other thing is kindness. Not to be cliche, but that's also a big draw for me, spiritually, creatively, everything. Talent and kindness are the 2.
What turns you off?
If I haven't alluded to this already in this interview, being fake. Being fake is definitely one of the biggest turn off. And again, I think there's a little duality with that in talent, because I think talent, I sort of mean you being genuine and like expressing your genuine self. But if I'm the person in the room you're talking to only because I'm the highest person on the totem pole, and otherwise you don't even know you don't even say hi to me in the hall, that's a real turnoff.
What is your favorite curse word?
I'm gonna be uncreative and say fuck. I use fuck a lot. I just, in fact, I don't even realize how much until I go like outside of New York, like back home to Pennsylvania, or around like people with kids or whatever, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happened? So I mean, it's just what a great word. It's just phonetically fuck, you know, and ficken in German. There's just something about it. It's just that's my favorite curse word.
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania too, and I heard it there as well. So
I mean, I know, but not. I'm a really New Yorker potty mouth now. It's bad.
What sound or noise do you love?
A cat's purr, and particularly my cat, Little Doebler, who has not made an appearance. I'm amazed. That to me is my favorite sound. What
sound or noise do you hate?
Weirdly enough, knuckle cracking. I can't do it. First of all, I'm afraid to do it, and like I play piano, so anytime I see like someone like hold that and do that with their fingers, I just, it's like nails on a chalkboard, which doesn't bother me, but I just immediately I'm like, ah.
Oh. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, kind of ironically, I've actually had serious thoughts about that, considering what's happening right now. You know, I'm kind of like, what else can I do? What else would I mean, I think I would love to be a tech person. I've seriously given consideration to, when things open back up, like working at the Apple store, the short local mall here. You know, I have a watch, I've got my, you know, I'm a big fan, and I was an engineering major, so I did start out in tech. So I think if worse comes to worse, I will, because I think I have enthusiasm about that kind of stuff. I probably would do that.
What profession would you not like to do?
Skydiving. I don't have a mental fear of heights, but I have a physical fear of heights. When I get high on a ladder, I get kind of like, whoa, and I think I would die of a heart attack before I hit the ground on skydiving. I think the other thing I would not want to do, and which I have great like sympathy for, and I always treat well, are people in like wait staff in restaurants. I don't know how people do that. I mean, if I had to do it, I would do it. I've never done it. I consider myself lucky. I think that is a hard job. You get customers who are just unreasonable and slow pay and everything else. So I'm always make it a point to be super generous and super nice to anyone in a restaurant that I encounter, because I think it's got to be tough. So that's another job I don't think I could do.
Lesson learned is tip your wait staff, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Number 10 is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I guess it would be God saying to me, well, I lost the bet with Satan. Don't let anybody in here.
That is very fun. All right, we're going to turn to some guests, some questions from our audience, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
This is from Lexi Vieira. She writes, what advice do you have for networking, since a lot of your career was about who you know? How do you meet people when you don't know anyone?
Ooh, what a good question. What a good question. It's just so hard, because it's so non-scientific. I mean, I would say that you have to be social. I would say that some of the stuff is like not even in the workplace necessarily, but it's social. You know, if you know someone in the business who's going out, you know, for drinks or going to some kind of whatever, to get to know people that way is one way. I would say that doing gigs that, I mean, like musicians, I will say, often say they do their first few gigs for free. And you don't normally promote that because no one should work for free. No one should work for low pay. But you are making connections. And like, I'll tell you a story. When we were doing the, for me as a musician, we were doing the either Easter Bonnet or the what used to be called Gypsy of the Year. But it was the Equity Fights AIDS semi-annual event. And there was a pianist named Ted Arthur, who was just a volunteer playing in the pit. And I was the MD of that event for 1 year. When Ben Cohn was too busy to do it, he usually spearheaded it. And I remember liking his playing and really liking him. And eventually, he went and said, let's go out for coffee and talk. And he really wanted to break in. And I recommended him to Wicked, and Wicked was full for a long time. But finally, I made one more plea, and he got to Universal Pianist, and he started subbing. Now he's like, was the associate on the Prom, and gave me work before when I was in between jobs as a sub. And he's the guy, I believe, that conducted the overture of last night's Stephen Sondheim celebration.
Oh, yeah.
Like I actually, so here's somebody who did a free gig for a good cause, and I'm not taking credit for his career because he's amazing on his own. But like through networking, he's now somebody that I hope to work for someday. I don't think he's conducting a Diana whenever that show might happen. So he's really popped. So I would say you have to do gigs that you might be like think are not going to be maybe glamorous, but you get to work with people who have connections elsewhere and at different levels. At the regional job you do might lead to a job that's that person's going to go direct a Broadway show. Like again, that loyalty is important and the references are important. And people are very hesitant to reference anybody if they're not going to do a good job. And I will also tell you, if you're difficult to work with and you're somebody who's like a pain to be around, you will be de-recommended. I mean, I will tell you, frankly, there are people who walked in the audition room that I have said, no, thank you. It's poison, and that's it. So I have personally, and again, I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to work for a job, with somebody who's going to be poison in the cast. So I think you just have to, it's definitely hard when you move to a new city and you don't know anybody. But like I said, the free connections I had where I didn't know this person who worked at Wicked, but my roommate happened to take a class from her and she needed a pianist. And it's that kind of thing. And I could have been like, oh, I'm not here to play classes, or, it's not much pay. But then she was my mole at Wicked, you know what I mean? So I would say just everything that seemed like it'd be at first thought a dead end, maybe see what happens. Turn the page.
It's so interesting. We've talked a lot about really successful people, and what you're saying here really matches up with a lot of what they say, which is, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's that you have to work for less than you're worth to get the jobs that'll get you paid more than you're worth.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and everyone did, from like Susan Schulman to Andrew Lippa. Everyone did stuff for free or for volunteer or for low pay, and I don't think they even intended at the time to make connections and network, but that's what was happening, and it turned out that was, where their great connection came from. Almost every successful musical theater professional I found has a very similar story. I'm glad you brought that up. You may have heard of this person. This is from Lauren Gillis. She asked, I'm sorry.
Ooh, wait, what?
Matt and Lauren are very good friends from Wicked. So Lauren is one of my graduate students.
Love her.
I'm not going to pretend not to know her. But anyways, she has a great question, which is, what should students prepare or have in their audition book when auditioning for Jagged Little Pill?
That is an excellent question. Well, I'm glad you brought it up. I'll give you this story. This is a great story. If you take nothing else away from this, please take this. So everybody who auditions for Jagged Little Pill, is going to do the You Ought to Know type songs, right? They're going to rock out, pop out, and go crazy. And that is important, and we certainly need to see that. to be a part of our show, whether you're playing the part in that show that sings the song or not. All that's important. But and this goes back to my first comment about the book having like 50,000 songs and you don't know what's in it. You must have a variety of styles, and you must bring all those styles to the thing, because sometimes we're going to look for something that has nothing to do with the show. We're looking for an acting quality. So we might say, can you do this polka, but act as if you're raging against somebody, or, you know, like to see a different angle, that kind of thing. If it's off the musical track. I'll just tell you the story. One of the most recent hires we had, which was for a vacation swing for Jagged. Again, a lot of people can sing songs like You Ought to Know Well. Okay, a lot of people can belt their faces off. How do you separate yourself from that? Well, it just so happens that for the track in our show, there's parts that Tom Kiff has arranged that I would call rock soprano. Okay, it's like up here, it's like, you know, I really want, it's like way up there as part of the soundscape. So and there's other parts of crazy, you heard crazy soprano stuff happening. There's a theme for a character that happens in the background, a cappella, that's very high and floaty and eerie. So we needed a soprano. So where this person was like, I don't have anything in my book but rock and pop anymore. I don't do any of that. Well, she happened to forget I was summing through, and on the very last page, she had 16 bars of a quiet thing. A quiet thing, okay? The opposite of anything in our show, if you've seen our show.
It's loud.
That got her the job.
Wow.
A quiet thing. 16 bars she sang it quiet, like, again, like beautifully high and quiet. And it was like, she had the range, she had the style, she had the control. She sounded amazing. It was beautiful. We could listen to her all day. And so that cut her out from everyone else. I mean, so a quiet thing got someone hired for Jagged Little Pill. So my point is, you just never know. Again, know what you're auditioning for, have a bulk of options for the main thing, but keep a couple of things at the end that maybe, you know, hey, you never know. But at least also know what's in your freaking book. Some people are like, oh, that shouldn't have been in my book, or oops, I got rid of those pages, or, you know, maintain your book. Don't take it lightly. I think as a musical, as you know, that's so painful when people like don't keep things in good condition. They don't keep their cuts in good condition. You know, you're just the poor pianist. You know, at times I'm behind the table and I've been an audition pianist. I will make sure to be like, dude, you saved them. You saved the day. You're amazing. They were lost. They didn't give you the right directions. They didn't know the tempo. You know, one piece of advice for rock and pop tempo auditions: don't rush. Understand groove. Okay, like being still and being slow does not mean lack of energy or that we don't get what we need from you. So many people take rock and pop songs 12 clicks faster than they're supposed to, thinking that's more exciting. And it's actually like, we're like, as a music, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, whoa, like the whole point is that pocket and that groove and that, you know, earthy, grounded kind of thing that goes. So please do not confuse energy with tempo, even if your nerves get you. And don't confuse stillness with strength.
I think I'm going to get a needlepoint of that. Don't confuse energy with tempo. I like that. There's several questions on this, and it stands to reason because the company of Jagged Little Pill is probably one of the most diverse on Broadway that we've seen for a while. This is from Neil Palmaria, but several people have asked a similar question, which is, what advice would you give to a person of color who is auditioning? For example, what is if their type isn't in the show?
Well, I mean, I would say that could be the limit of the show, which would be unfortunate. But I don't know. See, I think the nice thing is, I mean, we can get all sorts of things about what, used to be called like color blindness versus color inclusion and things, and where things have gone for that. A lot of people, I mean, unfortunately now we're embracing that thought of not using type, for every kind of role or every kind of situation. Like 1776 is a perfect example, right? 1776 is being cast without what you would called what had been the types, right? That's the whole, one of the wonderful things about it. And so I'll give you this. It depends on what's happening in the show, because if the show deals with, let's say, because we can talk about person of color or gender or other topics, but let's say people of color, our show deals very head on with racism and transracial adoption and issues like that. So there's no way our show to work and deliver the message if our character of Frankie is not, a person of color. I mean, that defeats what one of our strongest messages of the show are. And also the whole plot is that the parents are Caucasian, okay? Because the whole part of the plot is that here's somebody who's been adopted, who's now growing up in a very, for lack of a better word, white suburb of Connecticut, and there's obviously a lot of issues that can happen there, and how the parents are treating her and expecting her to grow up and not seeing her, like really seeing her. And so it doesn't make sense for the parents to be a person of color, right? I think it would be be confusing for people to understand the very real issue we're trying to portray societally if we cast, Elizabeth Stanley role, the mother role, as someone who's a person of color. And also, this is also like why in our classroom scene, for our character Frankie to feel isolated and feel like she can't connect to anybody, because she doesn't have anyone. She does connect to Joe, the character of Joe, who's Caucasian, but like in her class, we want her to feel a little like she's in a scenario where she's not surrounded by people of a race. And so our classroom scene is limited to Caucasian race and stuff like that, and it impacts our show as well. So there are times where the demands of the show, for the purposes of the plot and the message we're trying to get, there's no way around that. But otherwise, I feel like I know it may not feel that way or seem that way, but the trend, or what we would like the trend to go to, is to include shows and types where we're not considering that, right? Again, whether it's race or gender or anything else, we want to start so example, I think I mentioned Wicked and that countertenor Elphaba, right? Well, what was to say that Elphaba can't be someone identifying as male, right? I mean, that's something they haven't broached yet. I know Glinda, right? They, for a long time, just did not, we had African-American Elphabas. Sekon Senglo was one of the first I worked with, right? And so they were able to sort of, be able to understand, like, yes, of course we can have that, that a type for an Elphaba, but for Glinda, they felt like people just could not get beyond that imagination. In fact, it wasn't even about race. Brunettes who came in were like not getting her role because they weren't blonde. Like, people could be like, well, gee, I know we did Wicked, but at least couldn't see a Glinda. Now, it's not to say they didn't hire anybody, but like, in terms of that, there was no imagination. Well, now I know that the show eventually had a person of color recently as Glinda as well. So, I mean, I know it seems infinitesimally slow, and there's been a lot of steps back, but the wave, the force is forward moving. That's the direction we're going. So I would say, again, it goes back to what I was saying. The advice is no different. You don't have to worry about, I wouldn't say you need to edit yourself for type. You need to go in and present a strong you that they can make as a type, and then that's out of your control, right? Casting is so much out of your control. You can't force someone to say, I see you like this, even though it's not what I had in my head, right? That's the huge advice I give about auditioning, is 95% of what you do is beyond your control. And so you should go in, and you should be able to present yourself, a strong sense of yourself, and then they get to evaluate that. And so don't limit to yourself based on what you think they want. They're gonna do the limiting. So I say go in and, break some barriers.
I love what you're saying there, because I think a lot of people have thought long and hard about this, and there are roles that are limited by what cultural background you have or what the color of your skin is, and because of the story being told. But I do think that when you talk about types, that your cultural background or the color of your skin does not limit you to a type. You know, a
That's
type
what I'm saying. Yeah.
isn't you're the black guy. A
Right.
type is your essence, who you are as a human being, not the color of your skin or, you know, what language you spoke when you were a child or any of those things. Like your essence, your type is your humanity, and it should not be limited by anything that is superficial. It's what's inside that counts.
That's a much better way, elegant way of putting what I was saying. But yeah,
Well, that's what you said.
that's what it is. That's really what it's about. So yeah.
I got one last question for you. This is from Macy, and she or he, I'm sorry, however you identify, it's not clear, but thanks for the question. This person asks, what do you think the future of Broadway looks like? What's the future look like?
Deep.
And not like next month, like.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking 2021 now, which is sort of the chatter.
No, I'm talking the future.
Okay, the future.
A generation.
Okay. When we come back, I mean, I think, I mean, I'd like to think it's more inclusive and that the stories being told are you know, again, a lot more diversity for sure that's happening and will continue to happen. I think that, you know, we're also heading towards, I mean, there's some unknowns because of what's happening with this and in terms of how people are entertained, but I wonder that when we come back from this, you know, will we for a temporary time, depending on how painful the recovery is, will we be going back to sort of the musicals that were in the 30s, you know, which is a forget your troubles kind of thing, where it's like people are going to go for a little bit more escapist entertainment, you know, which is why in some ways I wish that the show I'd worked on, the Hard Rock and Roll, the Huey Lewis musical, that, you know, would be a perfect candidate for that, you know, because it's very fluffy and fun. And, you know, to be honest, Jagged is very real and very lifelike. It's almost like I just been through a very painful time, and I'm gonna, you know, but it's one of those things where I think you're going to see a little bit more maybe merging of some of the media. I mean, a lot of Broadway now is doing like a lot more like video integration and things like that. I think you're going to see like a little more integration in terms of some of the art. I hope that as we come back from this, that people reinvest in the value of being in live theater. You know, I mean, we're getting a lot of entertainment right now through the screens, you know, a lot of Netflix, a lot of Zoom. And I just know people are going to be hungry for something that's missing, which is that connection. So I think maybe, you know, a lot of theater is, you know, like Great Comet's an example where you're doing a lot of breaking of the fourth wall and interacting with the audience and things like that in a more immersive setting and in the round. And, you know, I feel like you may see more of that. You're going to see sort of maybe really capitalizing on, you know, what does Broadway have to sell once we get out of this? It's the live, it's the connection, it's the human kind of thing, you know, once we're like not spreading germs around, you know, to each other. I think we need to be able to kind of highlight that. I think that Broadway continues to get more technical, but also in some ways, I think some of Broadway gets to be simpler. I mean, you saw Jagged Little Pill. We don't have like a bunch of elaborate sets. It's a lot of panels, a lot of ideas, a lot of minimalism, and you have to imagine that. So I think, you know, things travel in cycles and waves, and things rebel against the previous thing, and everything except 80s fashion, I guess, you know, eventually comes back. I mean, there's sort of like a lot of that. So you're going to see reactions to and against what we've done. You know, I think you're going to see both of that. I just hope I hope someone surprises me, and the next thing that happens is something I never would have guessed would have happened, and I'm completely blown away by. You know, that's kind of my hope. Is I can't predict, but I think you're going to see a reaction to and against everything, and a further hopeful, you know, testing of the creativity and how far we can go, and rather than play it too safe, you know.
That's great. Well, virtual applause for our guest, Matt Doebler. Thank you so much. I
hope this was helpful to people.
Oh, it's fantastic, and I'm so grateful that you're here. The SDSU Studio Series returns on Wednesday, April 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, with legendary composer Tom Kitt. The series continues Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at the same time until May 6th. See our website for details, sdsustudioseries.wordpress.com. Thank you guys for all being here. Thanks.